The potential for burnout when you're living with type 1, it's really high.
I think it's important that we don't get overloaded with all of the data, and just realize that the numbers are just data.
I noticed that if I was looking at my trends too often, or even my time in range, I would start to really connect my self-worth to my blood sugars. And like you said, it's just information, it's data, but it can feel very personal when sometimes our decisions are leading to certain results.
Yeah.
And I just burst into tears at one point because I realized that I just thought if I had just mastered this diabetes thing, if I was doing everything right, there wouldn't be any problems. And as such, since I was having problems and hardship, it was my fault. And I was just quietly carrying that around without even realizing that I was. And I remember the moment where this kind of flipped for me. And I think my relationship with diabetes after that has never been the same. I've realized diabetes sucking is just part of the equation. It's not my fault that it sucks.
It's definitely not fun, right? No one wants this, but we already have it. And so might as well live the best life that we possibly can. For this episode, I'm joined in the studio by Shakitha Owens. She is a licensed professional counselor and certified bariatric counselor with over 15 years of experience in mental health. She is the founder of Abundance of Hope Counseling, where she specializes in trauma-informed care, behavioral change, and emotional wellness. As a dedicated advocate for the type 1 diabetes community and a mother of 2 sons living with T1D, Shakitha brings both professional experience and lived experience to her work. She serves as a board member with Breakthrough T1D's Dallas chapter. Shakitha, welcome to the show. I'm so excited for today's conversation.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I think we could both agree that T1D requires so much mental energy all of the time, whether you live with it yourself or you're a caregiver to type 1 kids. It's a lot mentally. What do you think about that?
I think that definitely it's a lot. It can be exhausting. It can cause people to be fatigued. And so that's why we definitely have to get a grip around it, because it can create mental exhaustion.
It really can. It's so constant. It's never ending. We talked about that on one of our other Voices of T1D episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us are impacted, right? It's not just the person living with it. So let's go through some of the things that add to the mental load of type 1 diabetes.
Well, I mean, for one, it's always changing.
It really, really is.
Mhm.
Always. What about the actual uncomfortable feeling of the highs and lows?
Well, I mean, keeping up with doctor's appointments.
Yeah, that's a headache. And so is dealing with insurance.
Yes. And also just the constant worrying, about you or your child's safety.
Yeah, and you always have to be so prepared with all of the supplies.
Mm-hmm. And think about the financial cost of type 1 diabetes.
That's a hard one. And also you have to carb count at literally every single meal or snack.
And the mental math
Mhm.
of the various factors that impact blood sugars.
Absolutely. We also have to explain diabetes to everyone around us constantly.
And the technology failures, oh my gosh.
The failures and the beeping, that's a lot.
The lack of sleep many days.
And even if we try to control it, we never really can.
Mm-hmm. And think about travel and the change of routine.
Yep. And also just having to always have access to power for all of our technology and medical devices.
Yes, those are all a lot.
That really sets the stage for what people around us don't often see. And I think one thing that can be really helpful is setting boundaries, whether it's with yourself or with your child if you're a caregiver, or even other people in our lives. Setting boundaries, I find, is really important. Do you agree?
I definitely agree. I think when it comes to setting boundaries, especially with the little ones or the teens, it's important to be able to make sure that you don't overstep boundaries. You don't overstep those boundaries. And I always think about boundaries as being like that little space bubble, and just making sure that you stay within your space. Because sometimes when you step out of your space, it can make others feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it could lead to a very, very, difficult relationship with our loved
Absolutely.
ones.
Can you speak to more about your experience as a caregiver and how you've set boundaries and maybe even how those have changed over time?
Yes. So I have an 11-year-old and I have a 27-year-old that's been diagnosed with type 1. And so just being able to look at the difference in their ages, over time, it's changed, versus with the 11-year-old now, that's the age where they start getting ready to go into puberty. So different things change. And so as I'm trying to let him become independent, I also got to see what areas I need to pull back in as well. Because he's wanting to start doing things on his own and not having me there all the time, so
Yeah.
it's getting better with him. We're working on it day by day. And then with my older son, with him, it's just on an as needed basis. I'm like, okay, I check in, you let me know what your needs are, and we can go from there. And I know earlier, even with just sometimes one of the things that came up this week was his sensor stopped working. And he's like, can you call them and help me send it back? And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I'll get on it.
He's
But
lucky.
yeah, it's on an as needed basis. Like, just let me know. And I'm like, you still need me to send that sensor off? He was like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's on an as needed basis, but that relationship is good because he knows that he can come to me about whatever he needs.
Yeah, that honestly sounds like the perfect setup. And I'm sure it's not always easy for you to just kind of let him do his thing, right? How do you deal with that personally as the caregiver?
Well, I'm going to tell you, if I see something, I'm going to say something.
Yeah.
If I see something, I'm gonna say something. He had this thing where he wanted some sushi. He found this sushi spot, and he went and ordered all of these sushis in the little to-go plate, and it's like a bunch of little California rolls. And he opens it up, and he's like, "Mom, you want some of this?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is in my mind. All I felt was carb, 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 blood sugar spike, all that rice." So, but he ate it over, a matter of maybe a couple of days. But yeah, so in that moment, I'm like, you're about to eat all this. So I will say something. If I see something, I'll say something.
Yeah, but it's so nice that he knows he can come to you when he does need something. I can relate to that a lot with my family. They've always been so supportive in that way. And as a person living with type 1, I feel like I've had to learn to set boundaries in a way that works for everyone. I really try to be aware of how much of a mental toll it can take on my family and even my partner. So when I was going to college, I ended up having this conversation with my parents about diabetes because, of course, they wanted to follow my blood sugars and see my data. And I said, you can follow it. But we set this rule that unless I was urgent low for more than 10 minutes, they weren't going to text me about it because they were going to trust me. And that was just our agreement so that they could still see my blood sugars because I could take them off, right? But I know that they care and I want to give them that so that they also aren't constantly worried. And being able to do that, they weren't annoying me with messaging me about it all the time. I always knew they were there if I needed something. And I even try to get ahead of it. If I am really low, I'll text my mom first and I'll say, hey, I'm drinking a juice. Don't worry. And I know that that makes her feel so much better. Or a lot of families will even have an emoji setup where you just send them a juice box or something like that. But having those discussions and making it clear that, hey, I don't actually want to be bugs about diabetes all the time because for those of us living with it, it's already in our heads all day long and it's exhausting. So to have someone else always looking in on that and also getting onto you for it can feel even more overwhelming. But yeah, that's been really, really helpful. And even in my work, I get to talk to a lot of grandparents and there's even boundaries within grandparents and the parents of the type 1 kids, right? Because they want to get involved but they also need to respect that their child is learning about diabetes for the first time and they're experiencing it for the first time. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
Wow, that is a lot. But that sounds like an awesome plan that you came up with. I love it.
I think it works. Everyone's happy. It's a win-win. The potential for burnout when you're living with type 1 or for a caregiver, it's really high. Any tips for that?
I think when it comes to burnout, it's important just to make sure that, again, that you're checking in. You're checking in with your loved ones. You're making sure that you have those boundaries intact. And I think the biggest thing with that also is for the caregiver to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're not overdoing it, because sometimes as caregivers, we can overdo it, just overstimulate ourselves trying to make sure everything is perfect. And just know that it's not going to always be perfect. And that you will have some failures. And yeah, so I think that, when it comes to tips around that, just making sure that you allow your loved one to be able to make some decisions and have choices as well, and you not do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some signs that we be aware of when it comes to burnout?
I think the number one sign I would say is numbness and making sure that you're not in a place of not feeling anything.
Yeah.
And just being like, whatever. Because I know a lot of people get to that place. Also making sure that you are not, having any anxiety, being able to identify if you are having some anxiety and anxious during moments, because that's normal and it happens, but just being able to identify it. Feeling overwhelmed, identify it. Being able to identify all these things and not just, pretend that they're not happening. Um, but and then for as far as for the individuals with type 1, I would say, paying attention to not wanting to discuss type 1, paying attention to not want to take your shots, not want to check your blood sugars for those that are currently still, well, everybody's still probably doing finger sticks because the sensors don't always work properly. But just being able to continue to check those things. But if you find yourself that you're not doing that, then that can become a concern. So checking in is number one, and that's why it's good for everybody to be checking in with each other.
Yeah, I love that. I was definitely the kid that wanted to be independent, and I took on a lot of diabetes from a very young age because it gave me the freedom to go to birthday parties by myself and dance classes and things like that. And I feel like especially when you have someone with that type of personality, it's not even just easy to spot those signs. But I definitely have felt all the things that you just mentioned, and some of us will experience it for weeks at a time, months at a time, even a year. But sometimes I just have days where I feel really burned out, whether it's from a technology issue or calling insurance, like all the things. It's not just the blood sugars themselves that can send me into burnout. So I think having a support system around you, having those open conversations with your family can be really helpful because then they can step in just like you do for your kids and do those little things. Like even when my fiance picks up a prescription for me, like that is one less thing I have to do.
Mhm.
And everything adds up so fast. So it really means a lot.
Yeah.
I also really want to talk about technology. I think that's a big piece of burnout. I didn't have all this technology when I was first diagnosed, and your older son
Mhm.
probably as well. And so it's great. It does so much for me, which takes off a lot of the mental load some days. But then we also have access to data all the time that we never had before. And that can become very addicting and just add a lot of stress. So, what's your relationship to technology now and your thoughts around that?
Oh, that's a technology is a big one because we know that it's still growing. And like you said, that with my first son, we didn't have all of that. And I think now that we do, I think it's important that we don't get overloaded with all of the data, and just realize that the numbers are just data, you know. Um, and we have to really set our mind around not being frustrated, when those numbers are too high, when those numbers are too low. Oh, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? And just pretty much putting ourselves in the hot seat all the time, when things don't look perfect and they're not in that range that the doctor told us they should be in. And so I think that just being able to understand that those numbers are to help us. Those numbers are a guide,
Yeah.
you know, to just help you with what you're supposed to be doing. But with all of the data and the technology right now, I know that it's getting better. And they're still tweaking and making new things, and hopefully it'll continue to get better.
Absolutely. I've had to create boundaries going back to that with
Yeah.
my technology because I noticed that if I was looking at my trends too often or even my time in range, I would start to really connect my self-worth to my blood sugars. And like you said, it's just information, it's data, but it can feel very personal when sometimes our decisions are leading to certain
Yeah.
results, right? But it's not that simple. It's never that simple. So yeah, I think it's just something to be aware of, and I will now kind of go in every month or so, or even twice a month, and look at that and really adjust based on what I'm seeing for multiple weeks. Because the truth is, if you're looking at it all the time and you're always making adjustments, it's often too much. And being able to just talk to your doctor about it when you're at those appointments too, like we don't have to be so on it all the time. And I
Mhm.
think we put that pressure on ourselves because all of this stuff is right in front of us. It feels like we should be doing it all the time. So, yeah. Do you ever struggle with the relationship to technology for your kids as a caregiver? Like, are you feeling attached to that data sometimes?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I know that I am. And I would say that, going to the different events with Breakthrough T1D. I mean, like the information is in your face 24/7. You got all of the social media with Breakthrough T1D that's popping up. Like this is an information-based organization, so the information is always there. And so every time you get something new, guess what? You want to try it. You know, you got these new snacks that are protein based. So I mean, all of these things, like you're always wanting to try new things. And so these last few days, I got a whiff of some new information. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to pre-bolus. We're going to do our protein. We're going to do this. And I had all of these things in order. And that was Sunday. That was after your event. And so Sunday, we got on the road and he stayed good in the green all day Sunday. And I'm like, okay, this really works. So, and then he went back to school and it just went everywhere. I'm like, what happened? I'm like, okay, that's because I wasn't on it. I wasn't on it. And so I just being here today, I'm texting the nurse before we got started and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
he's reading high. What's going on?
Yeah. That's such a good example of the mental load, actually, because even when he's at school, right, you're thinking, well, I did it this way on Sunday. Why can't I do it when he's at school? And even if you're not there doing it, you're worrying about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you're doing great. And you know that. I don't have to tell you that, but that's just diabetes sometimes.
Yeah.
You're going to have those ups and downs, especially when you're doing different activities. And along those lines, let's talk a little bit about the judgment that sometimes we feel. I don't know about you, but I've been in endo offices in the past where, whether or not they were trying to, I felt judged about my data and what they were looking at. And sometimes our A1C, our time in range, can kind of feel like a report card because you're having those numbers in front of you again. And it's such a personal thing that we're dealing with every single day. So it's hard to separate that from our actions. But yeah, do you ever judge yourself or feel judged based on that data?
I think that I do. Definitely when we're coming up on that quarterly appointment and we're getting ready to go to those visits, I'm thinking to myself, okay, is his A1C going to be higher? Have we been doing good? Even though I have all the data. But in my mind, like that's something that's going, that I'm kind of worried about prior to those appointments. And so when you get there and those numbers are not looking right, or it went up a little by 1 point, then yeah, definitely the judgment comes in. Like, what can we do differently? Okay, what did we do wrong? Even sometimes in the morning, we're headed to the doctor's appointment and he's eating his breakfast. And then we get there and then his blood sugar was 300. And I'm like, okay, that's because he just had breakfast.
Yeah.
And the insulin hasn't kicked in just yet. But even in that moment, even though I know, why his blood sugar is high, it's still that moment of thinking like, oh my gosh, like 300.
Yeah. I've definitely been there. You feel this pressure when you're at the appointment in the moment.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult when you've done something to a different degree before. I've had that where my A1C has gone up. And once you get it down to a certain point, you do kind of feel like you have to stay there. But the truth is, I always say there's seasons of life and there's seasons of diabetes, and your blood sugars are always going to change and your life circumstances are going to change. So how can we expect the blood sugars to stay the same when everything around us is changing? So yeah, it just is a roller coaster sometimes, and just reminding ourselves not to judge ourselves because we are doing the best that we can with all the information we have, because it is a lot. Yeah. Okay, any other last takeaways on the subject of burnout or things that people can do if they're needing help?
Well, definitely, I would say reach out to some of the resources. They can always go to Breakthrough T1D website. We have resources on there. And one resource that a lot of people are not aware of is the EAP programs through their employer. It stands for Employee Assistance Programs. And a lot of them offer free counseling to their members. It may just be 3 sessions. It could be 5. It could be 8. I've seen as high as 20 for the year. And so that's for your immediate family. So that's another one. And then also NAMI. That's a National Alliance on Mental Health as well. And they have a 988 number. That's for suicide, but that's a little bit for more severe cases for mental health. And then they also have a crisis text line, and you text home to 741-741. So that is another resource as well. But you can always go to Yeah, you if you're looking at your medical benefits, you can go through there just like you're looking for endocrinologist, you can look for a professional counselor there as well.
Amazing. I feel like the community has actually been so healing for me as well, being able to be around other people who understand this. There's something so nice about it, especially when I'm feeling burnout. It really just eases a lot of my concerns when I realize that other people are going through the exact same things as me. And even listening to episodes like this can be really reassuring. And then I also have been really trying to focus on gratitude and just remembering that diabetes has brought a lot of beautiful things into my life. It's definitely not fun, right? No one wants this, but we already have it, and there's nothing we can currently do. Breakthrough's working on it, but nothing we can do to change it. And so, might as well live the best life that we possibly can and try to pick out the little things that we are doing right in our day. Because I think when we're getting the constant alarms and we're seeing those numbers, we always tend to focus on the bad. It's just easier to latch on to that, but we're doing so much right. Like if you're keeping yourself 75% in range, that is 75% of the day that you're staying in range.
Yes.
And people without diabetes don't have to ever think about that. It's just naturally happening. So I really like to lean into that.
Yeah.
Now we are so pleased to be joined by Sam Tolman. Sam is a behavioral researcher and multiple-time product lead in health and wellness startups. He loves building systems to identify, predict, and alter behaviors and health outcomes using multimodal data sets, with the goal of making it effortless and even fun for people to take care of themselves. Sam is one of the facilitators and co-founders of the Diabetes Sangha. He was diagnosed with T1D at 8 years old and has been on a long arc of trying to understand the human experience and learn how to support meaningful and helpful experiences ever since, through the lenses of both science and meditative practice. Something I've been working on is incorporating my own mindfulness practice. And for this, I'd love to bring in Sam Tolman to the conversation. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Raquel. Chiquita, it's great to be with you both. Yeah, just so glad you guys are talking about this. I think there's a lot of different really important topics to cover when we talk about mental health generally, and especially mental health for diabetes. And as you know, I'm a big fan of this tool of mindfulness and meditation, and grateful that you're opening up the opportunity for us to actually bring this to more people.
It's so great to speak with you. And I've been working a lot on my relationship with diabetes over the years. I think for a long time, I thought if I just ignored it, didn't really pay attention to it, that it would actually feel easier and lighter. And as I've gotten deeper into my management, I've realized it's quite the opposite. Maybe it was a little more work in the beginning of kind of figuring out what works best for me. But now, the more I pay attention to it in little moments throughout the day and just give it the attention that it honestly needs, my life feels so much more free and I can actually do all the things that I want to do. And I feel good. That's the best part about it. So I'm curious to hear more about your relationship to diabetes and how you think about that within your own practice.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight. I love what you said, Raquel, about just giving it the attention that it needs. Because there's some things that I hear in that really relate to how we even define what mindfulness is. We hear this word a lot, and sometimes people use it to mean, I'm going to be more attentive to something. I have to be more mindful. I have to be more attentive, or I have to remember better. Like we use mindful in all of these different ways. But I think it's really helpful to actually step back and say, like, what do we really mean when we say this? Um, there's lots of different definitions, but generally you will see and I'll give you my personal one that we use in the Diabetes Sangha. But the one, generally you'll see two elements in any definition of mindfulness. One is, yes, there is an attention or an awareness, and that's really important. Two is that it has to be kind of relatively moment to moment. So I'm hearing you saying that when you're saying, I'm just in that moment, I'm giving it the attention that it needs, my diabetes, that is. But three, there's this third piece that's almost always there, which is that it has to have a kind of caring or open quality to it. And I'm also hearing that, right? Even just in the way that you're phrasing it, right? Like, I want to give it the attention that it needs. You're recognizing that there's a need there and you're trying to meet it in a kind of loving or open or caring way, which I just think is so lovely. Um, some people think of themselves as meditators or mindfulness practitioners, and some people don't. And so often we don't realize the ways that we are practicing or what we're practicing throughout the day. And it's just lovely to hear what that looks like for you, whether or not you even realize you're doing it. I will just take a step back and say, you asked about my relationship to diabetes. Um, it's been a journey, and I know that you guys have already been talking a little bit about your own journeys and diabetes and mental health. I'll skip forward a little bit so we can avoid, I've had diabetes for 23 years now, so I don't think we need the whole 23-year history. But I'll skip forward to when I was in my kind of probably about 20 years old, and I started meditating. And, I didn't start meditating actually because of diabetes. At that point, I'd had diabetes for, about 12 years since I was 8. Um, Management was relatively good from a kind of blood sugars standpoint. It wasn't getting too many complaints from my endo. So that was all going just fine. And really, I actually started meditating because I wanted to improve my performance on the football field. I was a football player in college, and I was like, I had heard from a mentor that it helps you get your mind sharper. And I was like, all right, I'll do whatever it takes. And so I started doing that, and kind of over time went deeper and deeper. And it wasn't until, I had a moment of kind of really diving deep into practice on a few meditation retreats in a row. And I had this moment where I realized, and I've told this story before, so some people might have heard me tell it, but in the Zen tradition that I practiced in for quite a while, there's a tradition of these kind of stories or kind of parables or teaching, I don't know what to call them other than like sentences, stories, phrases. And sometimes they really do feel like a parable, but you meditate on them for a long time and you kind of just mull it over in your mind. And so there's this one story that I'd love to share with you both right now. Um, and in this story, this teacher encounters this mysterious person who's been attending his talks. He's been giving talks to his students. And there's this mysterious person that's always there in the back listening and then kind of disappears almost in a magical sense before he can get to talk to him. And so finally one day, this mysterious figure is hanging around after the fact. And he goes up to this mysterious figure and he says, "Hey, who are you?" Kind of, what's going on here? And this figure, the first thing he says is, "I'm not a human being." So you get this kind of, ooh, I don't know, maybe it's a little spooky or definitely something mystical going on here. And, of course, it has a mythological kind of feel to it, but he's telling this story of how he was turned into a fox, and then he looks like a human being, but he's actually a fox now. And why did he get turned into a fox? He got turned into a fox because, millennia ago, he himself was a teacher. And somebody came up to him and basically asked, "Hey, if you really get this whole meditation thing, if you become a master and you perfect it, are you kind of free from the ups and downs that life brings?" And this fox man in his previous life, when he was a teacher, said, "Yeah, if you really get this whole meditation thing, you're totally free. You don't have to deal with all the ups and downs of life." And, clearly some mythological force didn't like that. And so he was turned into a fox and had to live that way for a long time. So he goes to this teacher nowadays and he says, "I really don't know where I messed up. What was I supposed to say? Are you free or are you not free?" And the current teacher, who was actually this is a mythological story, but he was a real teacher in medieval China. He says, "You don't ignore the ups and downs in life." He says, "It's not whether you're free or you're not free. You don't ignore that they're happening." And I remember working on that. And there was a moment sitting hours and hours with this. And I just burst into tears at one point because I realized that I just thought if I had just mastered this diabetes thing, if I was doing everything right, there wouldn't be any problems. And as such, since I was having problems and hardship, it was my fault. And I was just quietly carrying that around without even realizing that I was. And I remember the moment where this kind of flipped for me. And I think my relationship with diabetes after that has never been the same. I've realized oh, diabetes sucking is just part of the equation. It's not my fault that it sucks. It's just part of having it. Um, and that not ignoring, right? Like you were saying, giving caring attention to it over time is such an important way to show up in your day-to-day life. And so, I'd say like that was a defining story in my relationship with diabetes generally. Um, and something that I hope like, we all can't have a moment like that, but it's a trajectory that we can learn and work with that like, it's not our fault that this is hard. And if we can provide some caring attention over time and learn how to work with it just the way that it is, it makes the load a little bit lighter.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. I resonate with it so much, and I feel like especially parents that I talk to of type 1 kids, I'm curious to get your take too, they feel like their child's not caring enough and they wanna push them to do that, right?
Mm.
And now having so many adult type 1 friends that have lived with this for, 25, 23 years, y a lot of us have that moment of some sort, right? Maybe not the same exact story, but a moment where everything shifts and we realize, "Wait, I've actually not been paying attention to this, and it's actually not serving me even though it felt easier for so long." So, that's such a good reminder. What's your thought on this as a caregiver and also a professional in the space?
Definitely, I feel like it's big, it's huge. Um, and One of the things that I often share is around, cognitive behavioral therapy. Just really pulling out, your thought process and how you're thinking about things versus how you're feeling. And then, just this whole thing about the cognitive behavioral triangle, because with that, pretty much everything you think, if it's negative, is going to turn into a negative emotion. And then if it's positive, then we're gonna have a positive emotion, then we'll change that negative, reaction to something positive as well. And a lot of times we do this already from day to day. We don't realize it. We haven't put a name on it. But really that's what we do, and you want to be able to change any negativity that you have around it. Just what Sam has been saying about his journey. He had to really change how he was thinking about his hold that he had on diabetes because it actually had a hold on him, versus his
That's right.
able to take control of it. And so I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Chiquita. I think I just want to circle back to something that Raquel, you had mentioned also, which is like, the way that parents struggle with this. One thing that like we're really adamant about in the diabetes sangha, and I have felt for a long time, is that parents have type 1 diabetes too. We don't often think about it, right? We think about what's confined to my body and my blood sugars go up and down. And okay, the person whose blood sugars are going up and down is the one that has diabetes. But if you think about what it is to struggle with type 1 diabetes, parents are really dealing with the exact same types of struggles that the person living with it is. Um, and the only difference is that the person living with it has the burden of this feels bad up, going up and down and has an impact on my life. And so that's a big, additional burden. But parents actually have a different burden, which is the burden of fear and worry and shame around, caring for their child, which is huge. And I think, I'm not a parent, but all the parents that I know, I would venture to say that is just as painful, just in a different way as the kind of physical embodied struggle of it. So I just wanted to start by saying like, if we recognize that we're all actually living with type 1 diabetes, both the parents and the individual who biologically has it, I think that kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. You can have a little bit of a conversation where you can recognize as a parent, like, oh, I'm struggling with type 1 diabetes. And because I'm struggling with it, I'm somehow trying to control my child's experience with it, so that I'm going to struggle less. And if you can just tease that out, at least there's the start of a conversation there, that can lead to some healing. There was another piece. I don't want to say too much at once, but I just got excited, Chiquita, about what you mentioned about this cognitive behavioral triangle. Um, that relates in a really interesting way to a concept which is kind of core to mindfulness, and you don't often hear it taught except kind of maybe if you go on a retreat, you can learn a little bit more about it. But it's an older Buddhist teaching, and most of the mindfulness teachings that we get in the United States are derived from Buddhist psychology. And for the most part, that's actually secular, and that's a whole separate conversation, but not problematic in any way. But there's a really important concept at the base of mindfulness of kind of some of the things that we're meant to work with and practice with and notice in this caring way over time. And we refer to it in English as the five aggregates. And what are they aggregating? Aggregating is like when things come together to create something. What they're coming together to create is our sense of self, or our I, or our mind. And so I'm hearing a lot of that in Chiquita, what you're sharing about the kind of CBT triangle, very similar to this concept of the aggregates. And the aggregates are kind of, the first one is the kind of sense experience. Maybe you could say like our bodily experience. The second one is our feeling about it. And so I think feeling is the shared one with the triangle, right? There's a feeling. The feeling has a direct relationship to our perception. That's the next one. So it's feeling, perception. So it's already flavored so much by the time it gets to perception by what we're feeling. And then you have the volition, which is kind of the behavior part of the triangle. So those kind of core three pieces, the feeling, perception, which is really similar to thought, I think, in the CBT triangle, and then behavior or volition in the aggregates. When we have a stronger mindfulness practice, you can actually learn to pay attention to each of those individually and the way that they kind of funnel into each other. And just noticing that can bring so much freedom from you're like, oh, this is just a process happening in my mind. Like, I don't need to be stuck in it, even if it's negative, right? Because sometimes we have the ability to kind of change it and make it more positive and when it's workable. But sometimes it's just a little too stuck to actually change it. And so it's nice to be able to have that practice saying, okay, this is just a cascade happening. I can feel, it feels negative. I can feel that negative feeling in my body. I know what that feels like. I can feel how it's leading me to perceive negative things externally, even when they're not there. I'm like kind of pulling them out of nowhere because the mind does that. And then, I can see how that leads to certain behaviors, which might not be what I want them to be.
Yeah, I always try to bring that element of positivity and like shifting that mindset in whenever I have even just a high or a low. I used to get so frustrated at seeing that high blood sugar and you're doing everything you can, it's still not coming down. I would waste so much energy on that. And I feel like parents can probably relate to this too. And then I realized, well, me feeling that way is not actually making a difference in the actual blood sugar. I've already had my insulin, I've gone for a walk, I've had water. That's all I can really do. So now let me just move on and try to let it go, because at a point it's just not something that we can control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can pay attention to the different things that are causing us distress in that moment, like at the moment of a low. And that can bring a lot of relief too. Like if you really touch base, and this is a whole other tangent which we won't get into, but I'm a big kind of neuroscience nerd, and this relates really closely to a concept in neuroscience called predictive processing or predictive coding theory, which is basically, the fact that our brain is trying to predict all the time what's going on. And sometimes it just doesn't have enough information to make a good prediction, and things are just a little jumbled up here. And so if you start to get in touch with what's really happening, you're literally allowing your brain to update its predictions. And so, in your example, Raquel, like low blood sugar, and I really relate to this, right? So I'll even just say it in the first person, like low blood sugar, I'm mad. I'm like, this sucks. This totally disrupted my day, whatever it was. And then I'm just like, take a moment to touch in, like, what is it that really feels bad right now? And probably there's going to be a feeling in my body, and that's going to feel kind of icky. And maybe some of that is the low, but some of it's my reaction to the low. So I can just touch base with that. Maybe I can try to relax into it a little bit. That can bring a little bit of ease. And then there might be a frustration that it changed the course of my day, or it's not what I had planned for some reason. So then you think about like, okay, this is like my mind is latching on to something that has already passed. It's already changed. And so this second piece, which so often causes us pain or frustration, which is change or impermanence. And then the third piece might just be a sense of helplessness, right? You might just be like, I always try to do this different, or I always do it the same way, and I always forget to do it different, whatever it is. Or this wasn't even my fault, right? This was impacted by XYZ factors that I couldn't even control. So often it's these three things that are just at the core of what we're wrestling with. It's the physical discomfort. It's the fact that we're latching on to things that have actually already passed or are kind of unstable or changing. And the fact that like we don't have as much control as we'd like to think, which is not a reason to kind of give up and lay down and not try to do anything, but it is a reason to keep a lighter grip on what we imagine is going to happen.
I love that. The lighter grip. Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we put this into practice? Let's do a blood sugar check, and then it'd be amazing if you could take us through a mindfulness practice. What are you at?
Sure. I am at 133.
I'm 128. We're
Oh.
so close.
All right. We ready for a little practice?
Let's do it.
Cool. So let's start. Make sure that, if you're listening at home, you've got a comfortable seat. Raquel and I have some limitations about how comfortable we can get here. I'm in a high top chair. My feet are just barely touching the ground. But get comfortable and get yourself in a seat. You could lay down if you want to, but sometimes you get a little too sleepy if you're laying down. However you're situated, though, really let yourself rest into your seat. So let yourself be heavy in the chair or in the couch. I notice that you can let go of some muscles that want to hold you up really rigidly. Maybe your back and your butt can soften into the seat. Now just take a moment to relax and bring ease to the body. That's the first step. It is always a good way to start practice. So let's start just by paying attention to the face and the forehead and the scalp. If you notice you can let go of something, maybe your eyebrows or your jaw or muscles behind your ears. Maybe you can't feel anything too much, and in that case, it's always helpful that you can scrunch your face up a little bit intentionally, bring some tension, and then let it go. See if you can let your tongue be heavy in your mouth, your throat be relaxed, your shoulders, you can give them a little roll if it helps. And moving this way down, your chest relaxed, maybe even just barely caved inward, not so proud. And your lower back and your belly soft, not trying to pull in, not trying to impress anybody. Your hips be soft and your legs be heavy. So this is our foundation. This is a relaxed body. And we'll need to keep coming back to this because the body will tighten back up in response to our thoughts. Let's just see for now how it feels to breathe gently into this more relaxed body. Just noticing what feels good about breathing right now. And particularly putting your mind, putting your attention on what feels the best. Just leaning into really making breathing feel good right now. You might notice it feels good to follow the air in from the nose into your belly or throughout your whole body. You can imagine breathing from your toes to the top of your head. For some people, it feels really nice to breathe in and out of the heart, as if your breath is just going straight there and just warming it. So during this phase, we've relaxed the body, but we'll keep coming back to that so you can check in if there's something you can loosen up again. And then we relax the mind. And we do that by paying attention to what's pleasurable. This is an ancient instruction. First relax the body, then you relax the mind with pleasure. And as you're doing this, you're going to have lots of thoughts pop up, of course. And you're going to wonder if you're doing it right or what you're supposed to be doing. And you're going to think about what just happened a few minutes ago and what's going to happen next. And when these thoughts come up, just check in with what's happening in your body. See if you've gotten tense again. And most likely you have, and you can settle that and breathe in the most pleasant way you know for this moment. Breathe like you're giving a gift to yourself with each inhale. And like you're letting go of what's not needed on each exhale. Again, as you keep breathing this way, you'll notice that your mind wants to move to do something new. Find something wrong with the current moment, or the way that you're meditating, or the way that I'm leading, or something wrong with what's happened before, or what you think will happen next. And this is where we develop a different relationship with life. As these thoughts come up, because we have a little bit more relaxed body and a little bit more relaxed mind, we can do something a little different than what we normally do. You can recognize that they're happening. Maybe you hear the thought in your head, or maybe it's a visual that you're imagining, or maybe you feel what it feels like in your body to have this thought. And rather than go on a ride with it, and rather than push it away and condemn it, you can just let it be. And you can stay in your center in this relaxed body and this easeful, kind breath. And you don't need to do anything about this thought. You don't need to move towards it. You don't need to push it away. Just sit right here. Give yourself kind, loving breaths. And one breath at a time, you change your relationship to your whole life. Taking a few more moments of practice, seeing what else you can let go of in your body, seeing what more gifts you can give yourself and your mind. Before we close, taking a moment to wish yourself well, to appreciate what you've done for yourself, just listening to this, and certainly beyond in other ways you care for yourself. Even small ways like eating or drinking or sleeping. Take a moment to thank yourself, even if it's hard to really feel, and to wish yourself well. And as you're ready, you can start to bring yourself back. Taking some deeper breaths, perhaps. Making some small movements. And as we're coming back, I'd love to just read a closing poem. This is a poem by Liz Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, amongst other things. It's called Knowing. She says, "I am married now to this one thing inside of me that knows the difference between a yes and a no. And between a now I am available to you and now I am not. My loyalty is absolute. Not to you, not to any of you, but to the telling of the truth about what the heart of me knows. I like your bright face. I feel your valiant heart. But I cannot allow what I like or what I feel to erase what I know, or how hard I have worked to know it. You may walk with me, or you may leave, as you please or as you need. You may approve of me, or you may condemn. But your thoughts about me cannot be my deity, nor can I be your wish-fulfilling tree. And in the end, I can promise you only these few things. That I love you, for one. But I do not anymore chase, cling, deceive, or beckon. And if my answer should ever change, I will be the first to know, and you will be the second. So if your eyes are closed still, you can come back fully to this bright life that we're living with this messy diabetes. And I'll hand it back off to you, Raquel, but thank you so much for having me on. And thanks to Chiquita as well for everything that she added to the show.
Thank you, Sam. I feel so calm now and so much more present. That was truly so beautiful. And it's actually May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's a great time for all of us to check in on these things for ourselves and for our loved ones. If you're a caregiver to a type 1, or like we said, really anyone impacted, we all live with this in some way when you're in the type 1 family. So it's a great time to check in. And we hope that the resources in this episode can help all of you throughout the rest of your T1D journey. Well, thank you, Sam. That was great.
Yes. You're so welcome.
So really good.
After all this time.
You too. Thank you so much, Chiquita and Sam, for joining me today. All of your insights are incredibly important, and we hope that you all take something away from this conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe on all Breakthrough T1D platforms, and be sure to join us for the next episode of Voices of T1D. Thank you to our sponsors for making this possible.